Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. I had really thought to lay this thing to rest as far as the making of videos, at least. I am more than halfway in book 1 out of 3 of the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And I find that my dislike for the narrator has not diminished. He continues, he reads like a novel's unreliable narrator. I believe him to be reliable, but the tone that he takes, the incessant sarcasm with which he interjects every anecdote, and the book continues to be filled with anecdotes, it just makes me want to doubt him. Again, that's the difference between a genuine history and this, which seems like a getting off of his chest of all of his thoughts and irritations that have been germinating in his head, motivated, no doubt, by a self-righteous sense of indignation, if you will. But let me just give you an example of some of the sarcasm, which maybe it reads better in Russian. It turns me off. True, we feel a measure of relief when we learn that the tactical center on this occasion was not an organization, that it did not have 1, statutes, 2, a program, 3, membership dues. So what did it have? Here's what. They used to meet, goose pimples up and down the back. And when they met, they undertook to familiarize themselves with one another's point of view. Icy chills. None of that helps out the narrative for me. Now, this is from a chapter titled The Law as a Child, which I've just finished, and it puts me beyond the halfway mark. But in that chapter, I have come across the most remarkable passage that I feel I need to share. A lot of this chapter is responding to some document in which we and Solzhenitsyn hear the voice of Nikolai Krylenko, or Comrade Krylenko here. And with the magic of Wikipedia, I was able to find out a little bit more about him than I knew. It's great to have a resource like that at one's fingertips. A bit of trivia. Nikolai Krylenko was a brother-in-law to Max Eastman, whom I just did a video about regarding his relationship to the poet Claude McKay a little bit. Who knew? It's a small world. But Solzhenitsyn is discussing the judicial system early on, after all the remnants of the Tsarist system have been whooshed away. They found themselves, the communists, the revolutionaries, in a position where they had to condemn anything that had the imprint of the former Tsar on it. So, say, for example, somebody under the Tsar had been arrested and condemned or put in prison for, say, child molestation or something like that. Well, because the Tsarist system was discredited, such a former conviction could not count against him as a revolutionary. In fact, he must be a good man, because a conviction like that must needs be suspect. So, Krylenko, you look him up at Wikipedia, and he ultimately was purged. I think his last position was something like minister in charge of Soviet justice or something like that. But the most remarkable thing about this passage, and I will read it to you, is that the revolutionaries felt while they were getting rid of the former justice system or system of jurisprudence that existed under the Tsar, they had to have their own court system. It was necessary, but the courts could not be based on any kind of, I guess, bourgeois ideas of justice. So they had to evacuate the court system of any ideas of justice, which goes hand in hand with the idea of the dichotomy between guilt or innocence. And so Solzhenitsyn writes about this. The reason that fine points of jurisprudence are unnecessary is that there is no need to clarify whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. The concept of guilt is an old bourgeois concept which has now been uprooted. And so we heard from Comrade Krylenko that a tribunal was not that kind of court. On another occasion, we would hear from him that a tribunal was not a court at all. A tribunal is an organ of the class struggle of the workers directed against their enemies, and must act from the point of view of the interests of the revolution, having in mind the most desirable results for the masses of workers and peasants. People are not people, but carriers of specific ideas. No matter what the individual qualities of the defendant, only one method of evaluating him is to be applied: evaluation from the point of view of class expediency. In other words, you can exist only if it's expedient for the working class. And if this expediency should require that the avenging sword should fall on the head of the defendants, then no ... verbal arguments can help, such as arguments by lawyers, etc. In our revolutionary court, we are guided not by articles of the law and not by the degree of extenuating circumstances. In the tribunal, we must proceed on the basis of considerations of expediency. That was the way it was in those years. People lived and breathed and then suddenly found out that their existence was inexpedient. And it must also be kept in mind that it was not what he had done that constituted the defendant's burden, but what he might do if he were not shot now. We protect ourselves not only against the past, but also against the future. So, the passage is remarkable that this uprooting of concepts of justice from their court system was so well known and a matter of pride among the early communists. Once you know that fact, how can you not doubt that the system went badly in the future? So this is a chapter talking about the inchoate law system before it has fully developed, titled The Law as a Child. And my quotation that I just read is from page 308, 309 of this edition. If you want to test it out for yourself and see exactly where I was, where actually Solzhenitsyn was quoting Krylenko. I will link the Wikipedia page to the description about Krylenko in the description of this. I just find this astounding, and this has to have been the most astounding thing that I've come across thus far. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.